Right, hello guys, welcome back. Today I have a pure Strand Warlock build for you that takes heavy inspiration from the very first Strand builds at the launch of Lightfall, but converts them into a much more modern and adapted setup that's capable of competing with even the most current Prismatic Warlock builds, all thanks to some powerful artifact offerings and up-to-date exotic gear pieces. Getting right into it, today's build is going to revolve around the Warlock exotic chest piece Matiodoxia and the new and upgraded Barrow Dyad exotic submachine gun. I'm willing to bet you've probably forgotten a thing or two about Matiodoxia, so here's a quick refresher on how it works and how it fits into the build. The main trait, Stylostixis, reads, targets damaged by arcane needle emit a suspending detonation when defeated, and landing multiple arcane needles on the same target immediately triggers a larger, more powerful detonation. So, as for the first part, getting a kill with arcane needle will trigger a suspending burst, but also if the needle doesn't kill, the target will instead bear a green mark which indicates that once you defeat it, it then triggers said explosion, and the mark itself lasts for 10 seconds on any given enemy. Secondly, if the target is really healthy, like a champion for example, hitting the target with 3 arcane needles will then force the suspending explosion to occur, but this time in a much larger radius. Though to be fair, you won't be using this feature of the perk too often, at least compared to the first. Lastly, Matiodoxia also has 2 bonus effects where defeating suspended targets grants melee energy and your arcane needles are strong against barrier champions. The barrier stun portion is actually pretty decent since even in Grandmaster it takes just 1 needle to stun and you can then use the 2 that follow to suspend it as well if you'd like. But the more important part is definitely the melee energy return, since the more needles we can get, the more enemies we can suspend and the better our crowd control becomes. And actually, according to the compendium, defeating a suspended red bar enemy returns 15% of your arcane needle energy, which means you only need about 6 kills to fully refund the charge, something which is actually very easy to do if your enemies are bunched up tightly enough. The last piece of the puzzle that makes this build complete is taking the effects from Matiodoxia and pairing it with the Mind Spun invocation aspect, specifically with the Shackle Grenade, because now holding down your grenade button will consume your Shackle Grenade and activate Weaver's Trance for 25 seconds. And while this buff is active, any kill from any source will trigger a suspending detonation. Or in other words, you're getting even more uptime on your arcane needles since you're suspending almost every single enemy you come across. All that's left is to pair both of these things with a suitably strong Strand weapon, and it's here that the newly released Barrow Dyad makes its grand appearance. And for this build, I've custom tuned the weapon so that it has maximum synergy, but don't worry, there will be more on that in the weapons section. With the setup I'm about to explain to you, you're going to optimize the ever-loving hell out of this combo, which will eventually allow you to have access to literally all 3 Strand debuffs, which are of course Suspend, Unravel, and Sever, as well as the spawning of unlimited threadlings, constant unraveling rounds, constant woven mail, and massively accelerated super regeneration speeds. So we ought to start by discussing our subclass configuration, but before we get stuck in, I'd encourage you to join my community Discord server. A big goal of mine this year is to expand my community, and if you're looking for a place where you can check out my full catalogue of builds and hang out with me and the rest of our awesome community we have here, then do consider joining, link in the description. Kicking things off, because we are on pure Strand, our super selection is locked to Needlestorm, but this is in no way a bad thing. Needlestorm is a great super for both single target boss damage and ad clear with all the threadlings it spawns after each needle detonates. And a note about boss damage, normally Needlestorm deals 536,931 damage on its own, but if you pair it alongside the new Act 2 artifact perk Limit Break, which states that casting a super while you are critically wounded or have an elemental buff matching your super element grants a period of increased super damage, this number now jumps to 687,663. And because we will be getting woven mail fairly often with this build, you will be able to take full advantage of this. For the Rift, we're going to be taking Healing Rift since our healing options are somewhat limited on pure Strand, so this is just going to be nice to have in tougher content like GMs for example. And then for the melee and grenade, we of course have Arcane Needle and the Shackle Grenade for reasons we previously discussed. As far as the aspects are concerned, we've already touched on why we need Mind Spun Invocation, so for our second aspect, we're going to take the Wanderer. This aspect is going to heavily change the behavior of the tangles you create in 2 main ways. First of all, when you throw or break a tangle, it now detonates into a suspending explosion with a pretty good sized radius, and second, your thrown tangles are no longer affected by gravity and instead fly forwards in a perfectly straight line with improved tracking, which can make lining up your perfect placement a lot more forgiving. Furthermore, the Wanderer will allow any threadlings you create to also spawn tangles, which is just a nice added bonus. The main reason we want this is because again, it provides even more suspending explosions, which leans into Matiodoxia even further. As far as the fragments are concerned, the first we're going to need is Thread of Evolution. This fragment is going to make it so your threadlings travel farther and deal additional damage. In fact, it's a 33% increase in their damage, so not too shabby given that we're going to be spawning quite a lot of them. Up next, we're taking Thread of Warding, which will make it so collecting an orb of power grants woven mail for 5 seconds. And as a reminder, reminder, Woven Mail provides a total 45% damage resistance versus all sources. For our third fragment, we're going to need Thread of Fury, and this fragment is honestly pretty broken for this build because what it's going to do is make it so damaging targets with tangles grants melee energy, and when you pair this fragment with the melee energy bonus from Mataiodoxia, well, just see for yourself. So yeah, that's a lot of melee energy for simply detonating a tangle. In fact, it's all of your melee energy. So do keep this in mind and try to detonate your tangles within large groups of enemies, because for one, Thread of Fury will kick in, and then also all the enemies are suspended, which then gives even more melee energy back because of Mataiodoxia, which is honestly quite a satisfying loop. Finally, our last fragment is going to be Thread of Generation, which states that dealing damage generates grenade energy. And this is literally any source of damage. And the reason we need this is so that we can get our Shackle grenade back faster, which provides more uptime on Weaver's Trance. Okay then, now let's talk weapons, and why I believe Barrow Dyad is an excellent fit for this build. So first of all, let's start with how I've crafted mine for maximum results. My roll features Fluted Barrel, Alloy Mag, Smooth Grip, and the Hatchling Refit Catalyst. I'm also aligned with the Path of Ambition, which changes the Taken Diversions trait to read like so. Blight Generated increases the longer this weapon remains on a target. Blighted Seekers burrow into targets and explode. This mode grants a chunk of blight after firing roughly 12 bullets into the same target, which is going to be very easy to do in harder content, so I believe this is one reason why the Path of Ambition is just straight up the better option. Furthermore, if you're curious about how to obtain the Hatchling Refit, I've left a video from Scarrow in the description that goes over how to do so, because I know things can be a little confusing when it comes to upgrading this weapon. Now, there's a couple things that I want to note. One is that if you're playing with Barrow Dyad in general and not just for this build, in my opinion, aligning yourself with the Path of Ambition is always the better choice, because on the Path of Resolve, your Blighted Seekers deal around 5,000 damage, but on the Path of Ambition, this damage gets over tripled to now 19,000 per Seeker, and given that you can hold 6 of these, that's a total of 117,000 damage you're able to dispense in a very short amount of time. Also, out of the 4 possible catalysts of High Impact Reserves, Target Lock, One for All, and Hatchling by far makes the most sense for this build in particular. But you might be wondering, where on earth are we getting all of our Threadlings from? Well, this is where the artifact comes in big time, especially now that we have access to some of the Act 2 perk boosts. For starters, we're taking Unraveling Orbs in column 2. This perk is a no-brainer choice since collecting an Orb of Power grants unraveling rounds to your Strand weapons, aka Barrow Dyad, for 14 seconds, which is absurdly long. But also, with the release of Act 2, you can now boost Unraveling Orbs by reaching rank 3 on the Path of Ambition, which is now going to make it so your Strand weapons deal increased damage to Strand debuff targets, which turns out to be a small 5% bonus, but given that this is going to be active all the time with all the unraveling and suspending you're doing, you might as well take it and improve the damage of your Barrow Dyad in the process. Next is the new Act 2 mod Elemental Siphon in column 3, which states that rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon or a weapon matching your equipped super create an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super, which is just going to provide another avenue of spawning tangles, so you might as well have this. But again, it too has a boost which you can earn by reaching rank 7 on the Path of Ambition, which makes it so elemental pickups grant matching super energy when collected. So now, for simply collecting a tangle, you appear to receive roughly 2 to 3% of your super energy back, so better than nothing. But also remember that because Barrow Dyad is an exotic primary, it intrinsically generates way more super energy from simply dealing damage when compared to any other weapon type, and you can see that the Blighted Seekers provide noticeable increments to your super bar. Yet another reason why Barrow Dyad is an excellent choice. The last perk that truly seals the deal on this build is going to be Horde Shuttle in column 4. This perk makes it so damaging unraveled targets with a weapon occasionally spawns a Threadling. And again, because we're unraveling everything, we're going to generate a heap load of Threadlings, but also it too has a boost which comes from rank bloody 11 of the Path of Ambition, which is a painstaking grind, but I'm telling you it's worth it because now every Threadling you create applies the Sever debuff as well, not just the ones from Horde Shuttle. Literally any Threadling you make will apply Sever as long as you have this mod equipped, which by the way is a 40% reduction in enemy outgoing damage. So with all of these things combined, you're able to take advantage of every single Strand buff and debuff on offer all at the same time, all for simply getting some melee kills, collecting orbs, and slaying out with Barrow Dyad. A couple final notes on the artifact front. I also recommend you take Flashover from column 4 to make it so when you gain maximum bolt charge, you also become amplified and your lightning bolts deal 2.5 times more damage. Then pair this with Defibrillating Blast in column 5 so that stunning a champion grants maximum stacks of bolt charge and your lightning bolts heal you and apply jolt, mainly for if you decide to take this build into champion dense content like Grandmaster Nightfalls. Finally, there are supposedly 2 more Strand related artifact perks which have been leaked. The first being Vile Weave, which states that targets hit by your tangles are severed, reduce tangle cooldown by picking one up, and then 2 Shreds, which states that dealing sustained damage to severed targets unravels them. Defeating a severed target creates a hotspot of Strand energy, granting Woven Mail to nearby allies for a short duration. And if both of these mods are real, they would be absolutely phenomenal for this build, providing even more sources of sever and constant Woven Mail hotspots. And actually, there is some truth to these leaks, because if you look in-game, you can see that there's currently a locked artifact boost in the Tome of Want pertaining to the 2 Shreds mod, so fingers crossed these descriptions are real. Lastly, for your secondary weapon, I would recommend going with a rocket sidearm of your choice. I quite like running Aberrant Action with Heal Clip Incandescent, but if you have it, the new Lotus Eater sidearm with Repulsor Brace destabilizing rounds can also work wonderfully, especially since it synergizes so well with all the other Void artifact perks too. But this is more of a helper to the build. Barrow Dyad is truly the central focus and should be your main add clear weapon. Stats wise, I would recommend getting 100 in both Resilience and Discipline, then pouring the rest into Recovery. There's no need to bother with Strength since you get your melee back so easily from everything else anyway. Okay then, let's wrap up by going over our mod choices. Starting with the helmet, we're taking 2 copies of Hands On to provide some bonus super energy on Arcane Needle kills, then Strand Siphon to make orbs on double kills with Barrow Dyad. For the gloves, we have 1 copy of Heavy Handed to make the occasional orb from Arcane Needle kills, Impact Induction for some bonus grenade energy on Arcane Needle damage, and Strand Loader to make Barrow Dyad feel a little bit more crispy. Chest piece is general resist mods like usual. Then for the boots, you'll need Absolution and Innovation for some bonus ability energy on orb pickup, and Recuperation for a small health boost also on orb pickup. Finally, for the class item, we're taking Bomber again for more grenade energy on Rift Cast, Reaper to spawn more orbs, and Special Finisher. As far as the gameplay loop is concerned, your first objective should be to secure a double kill with Barrow Dyad to get both Unraveling rounds and Woven Mail going after collecting the orb that drops, and from then on, consume your grenade to activate Weaver's Trance and slay out by spamming your Arcane Needles and Barrow Dyad, and the rest should take care of itself. I must say that this build is truly a joyful viewing experience, since if you're in a tight room, everything just turns to bright green all of a sudden, and it honestly looks gorgeous. This was a very fun build to make, and I hope you enjoyed it. Here is the fashion I used in the video, and as always, there will be a dim link in the description. And one final note, when this video goes up, I'm going to be live on Twitch doing some solo witness practice. I'm trying to grow my Twitch audience more this year, so it would mean a lot if you could come by and drop a follow at twitch.tv/LlamaD2. I'll see you there. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.